experimentation. Today's project is inspired by Super Mario Galaxy. In the game, Mario uses a launch star to fly from one planet to another. The whole animation feels very magical and it's a great moment to appreciate the game's environment. I wanted to try and replicate this mechanic and see if I could achieve a similar effect using Unity. So here are the steps I needed to follow for this recreation. Implement an easy way to set the path that the player follows. Set some animations for when the character is flying. And add some final assets, particles, and effects. I started by importing the new Mix and Jam character, Jammo. The character includes some basic animations and also a third-person camera control for prototyping. In order to build the path for the launch star that was easy to edit, I decided to use the dolly track feature from Cinemachine. With this feature, it's easy to edit the waypoints for the path that the dolly cart follows. On the dolly cart object, I changed the position unit's parameter from distance to normalized. This way, the path position is referenced from 0 to 1. Instead of making the player itself follow the dolly cart object, I created an empty game object to serve as a parent of the player so I can change the rotation from those objects individually. I added a sphere collider on the path object in order to use it as a trigger. And then on the character script, I use the onTrigger function to detect when the player is inside the trigger. Once the character is inside the trigger and there's input, the launch sequence starts. For this particular animation sequence, I decided to use the DoTween plugin. With DoTween, it is possible to create a sequence of events that plays animations one after the other using append or at the same time using join. In the first sequence, I append a doMove function to make the player move to the center of the trigger, and had a doRotate function joining that event to reset the player's rotation. The second sequence is the path movement itself. DoTween also has the ability to tween floats using the doVirtualFloat function. So on this sequence, I made the position of the dolly cart go from 0 to 1. Once the player is following the path, I started creating some custom poses for when the character is flying and also rolling before it lands. Then I headed over to Mixamo to download a falling animation. Using Unity's animator, I was able to create a float parameter that was the same as the path position. So in this way, I was able to set the transition of the character animations based on the path position. I also added some rotation to the player on the Y-axis. Right before the second sequence, I add some tween animations for the character that pulls and rotates it before the launch. Since the path position was normalized, I was able to set things to happen when the player reached 70% of the track. In this case, I made the parent of the character rotate on the X-axis when the rolling animation is happening. Then, for some cinematic effects, I added a camera trigger object that changes the active Cinemachine camera. I made the triggers be dolly carts as well, so I can easily position them on any path. Since I was using a tween to make the main dolly cart position go from 0 to 1, I decided to add some easing to the movement. For this particular tween, I created my own animation curve to decide when the path was faster or slower. Then, I downloaded this model of a launch star on Sketchfab and implemented it on the project. I created animations for the launch star also using sequences, by rotating and moving the stars. Then I started adding some particles to the whole animation. The first one was a particle emission that followed the player when flying. The second one was a growing particle when the launch is preparing. I also added an emission with star sprites that use radial velocity over lifetime to converge on the center of the object. I used a similar emission for the launch explosion. The last one was a smoke sprite emission on the explosion that I also used on my character so that it emits when it lands. I added some screen shake for when the launch starts and when the player lands. I also added a trail renderer to the dolly cart object that activated when the player was flying. To change the actual sky for a galaxy, I downloaded the skybox set from RPG Whitelock on the Asset Store, and then I modified some of the textures by adding some stars on Photoshop. And finally, I added some post-processing to the scene like bloom, depth of field, and color correction. And after a bit of adjustments, this is how it looked. The link for the project's repository is on the description below. Mixing Jam is only real because of amazing people.
Okay, so more good stuff from Mix and Jam. He's really good at putting all these pieces together to create a really polished, experience. But obviously, he has very good reference material to draw from. Today, relevant to this video, we're going to be looking a little deeper into what Unity provides for camera systems. And as part of that, we will look at like that whole dolly cart thing that he was doing in that video. So let's get out of here.
Will help you out on Patreon.
All right, so let's see, where do we want to start? I guess to start with, the Cinemachine and that dolly track, like a lot of things in Unity, Unity has this big push of taking things that are kind of just glued onto the engine with like being one monumental download and then taking them off and allowing you to kind of attach them piecemeal. And that's basically what the package manager is set to do. So this isn't just people offering extra packages, right? This is kind of Unity taking things that used to be built into the engine and pulling them out and making them available here. So in order to get these features that we're looking for here, we'll need to look for Cinemachine. This is basically what provides all these, this really sophisticated camera system. And in addition to that, if we have time, we'll look a little bit at Timeline, which is just kind of an animation sequencer, like a non-linear editor with tracks that you can just have, you can edit a bunch of things that happen in a sequence. So with Cinemachine, I'm using this preview version, which you have to click and show preview packages if you want to get it. And you can also get some examples right there if you wanted to grab that. So once that's in there, right, it'll get magically whisked away into your packages section right here. But let's come back here and set up a new scene to play with here. So fixed cameras. Let's make a copy of this, and we'll start working with some like really basic cameras here. All right, so I've got a Marine or SEAL or some guy with a skateboarding helmet on for some reason. And what we want to do is basically have him move around, and we want some sort of camera control to see what's going on right here. Let me pull this out. By default, you have the regular Unity main camera that you know and love. But what we're going to do is we're going to sprinkle a bunch of different cameras around the scene and then just kind of view the scene from that angle. if you can remember old games like Resident Evil or things on the original PlayStation, a lot of times you just kind of move around the screen, and when your character moved off the side of the screen, right, it kind of switched to a different view. So we'll take a look at doing something like that. And I'm kind of moving the scene view right now in a place where I might want to put one of these cameras, right? So let's say I want to kind of view the scene from right here. But what I'm going to do is go to Cinemachine, and let's just go for just a normal virtual camera. So the thing to understand here is that when you're working with more sophisticated camera systems, you don't just have like one camera that you manipulate the transform on, right? There can be some really complicated logic, and it can be different depending on how you want to use your cameras. So instead, the way this system works is you can create as many of these virtual cameras as you want, and these things take control of the main camera. So if I just come out here, I can see, well, there's my virtual camera, but I don't see a preview because technically it's not a typical Unity camera. But if I click the main camera right here, I get my preview back, and that's the thing that's ultimately going to be rendering it. All these virtual cameras just control it. So that's good. I have a virtual camera there. And to let it take control of the regular camera, I think I already have the component on here, but you have to add this thing called a brain, a Cinemachine brain. So once that thing is attached, this brain knows to look for all the virtual cameras, and it's going to override the transform on the main camera based on the logic of our virtual cameras. So let's see here. Let's come back to our virtual camera and come in here, and let's just hit play. Okay, so there it is. It's snapped to that camera. Nothing special is happening in here. I don't have any controls hooked up to this, so that's fine. That works okay. Let's go ahead and create another one. Say you want to look at things from maybe where I'm at right now. So I'll go Cinemachine, create a new virtual camera. Now I have two of them. But at this point, there's nothing that really dictates how the control is going to happen between the two. I got one camera there, and the other camera is over there. You can see the frustum gizmo is just kind of showing the gizmo for where the main camera actually is. So because that's kind of where we left it, right? The camera got snapped over there. But that's the same position as this new virtual camera we got right there. The other camera is still over here, and you can't see it very well, but there is kind of a little blue gizmo camera outline on that as well. Okay, so let's see here. If you hit play, you should just be stuck to one of those guys. All right, so that's stuck to the very first one. If we look at the second one, right, there's a ton of options there, but where's it? Okay. The simplest way you can kind of steal or let the Cinemachine brain know that one camera is more important than another, at least at this particular time, is just to give it a higher priority. So they both have a priority of 10. They come in here and I say, you're 11. So that's it's actually just interpolating between the two right now. I guess there's nothing here that says to interpolate or not. Let's cut default blend. Okay, here it is. So by default, when you switch from one camera to the next, the way it's going to blend between those, it'll do an ease in, ease out, which looked kind of nice. Let's come back here and give that one a higher priority. Let's see, we're blending between those two. But, that's not always what you want, and you have some other options. Probably one of the most common differences is to just have a hard cut, so I could just come in here, put that in, and come back to camera 2, and there we go. Now I cut over to this. So that's a little bit smarter, but at this point we could write a script to change its priority, but this is such a common use case that there is something kind of built in to handle this already. And that is the notion of a, what's it called? A clear shot camera, right? So Cinemachine has some smarts in here to kind of pick which camera it thinks it's best and automatically switch to that. So I'll just delete this one that came with. The way this one works is that it's gonna evaluate which camera it thinks is best based on its camera children, right? So to give it some children, I'll just pop these down here, and they show up in the list. They're equal priority, right? It's going to be up to this now to determine which one should be shown. And let's see here. Yeah, let's play with this a little bit. One of the things you typically want to do when you're working with these cameras is be able to see your scene view and your game view at the same time, because a lot of camera editing actually happens in the game view. So this is kind of a different kind of editing paradigm than I think what Unity's done in the past, but probably more what they're going toward in the future. So, okay, I can see that there in the game view. I've got my two cameras. I got something evaluating my clear shot, and obviously it thinks this shot is the best. There's no reason to change that. However, if I want to move our seal around, right, I can just, instead of, I don't have to control them, but I can move them over here. Let's see. Where's our other camera at? Okay, other cameras out there. So let's see. Does it not ever think that other camera is the best based on, oh, you know what? Sorry, I thought I did something else. These cameras don't know about the character right now, right? So it's not going to change the shot. So, these cameras are kind of set to look at the character, right? That's the whole point. And in order to kind of link those things together, we need to give our camera some more instructions, right? We have to make these kind of smart cameras. So the first one is basically to look at these two parameters right here. We can either have our camera follow the character around, which we don't in this case, right? I just want fixed cameras for now. And the other one is that we can just use the look at. So that's fine. Let's go ahead and tell it to camera one should look at our seal. And now you can see the different editing tool we have here in the game view versus the scene view. Camera two should also look at him. All right. So coming back up here to clear shots. Now they both have them there. I wonder why these, okay. So I guess you can see that if you ever want to see what's going on with that camera, right, from that view, you can hit this solo button and I can just pop over there and now I can see what this camera sees. And currently you can see we're looking at the character's feet. So let's take care of that first. Let me undo this. So we have an aim here. Our camera is going to look at something, and here's the parameters for how it's going to look at that thing. There's different options here, but right now we just want to kind of compose our shot. So what does all this stuff mean? We won't get into all of it, but let's get into some of the pertinent things. You can see there's a red, kind of a green here, and if I click and drag just the right places, no? Well, I can do it down here. There's these different sections essentially, right? There's a dead zone, there's a soft zone, and then there's pretty much the hard zone after that. And the idea is that if the character's moving around anywhere inside of this blue area, that's the soft zone. So the camera's going to just try and interpolate there. And if the player was moving too fast that he got to the edge of the screen, right, and he starts to encounter the red, that's kind of the it's the hard zone basically, where the camera won't worry about interpolating, and now it'll just clamp to there to make sure that you can always see the character. The other option is the dead zone, and the idea with this is that if the player is kind of centered more or less in the view, you don't want the camera to do anything. You just want to be like, hey, I'll let you move around, and I won't move the camera while that's happening. So maybe you can close this up a little bit. Is this weird? Not sure why these things are not behaving, but I'll use this. Maybe squeeze that down a little bit. And let's pick up this tracking point right here from the feet to somewhere closer to his head. So I'll just say like 1.5 meters, or maybe just go 2 meters. That's probably fine. Okay. Let's go to our other camera. Let's do the same thing. Let's put that up at 2 meters. And here, I'll undo this because we're not using it. And let's see, are we ready to test? This should cut. And oh, so this is actually giving me a warning because I'm forgetting something. You know, when you see this nice, obvious message, it should tell you something's a little bit wrong. In order for this clear shot to evaluate which camera is best, you have to actually give it a collider. And the way to do that is you go to this extension section down here, and you come and find Cinemachine Collider. Let's do that for this one too. And now, okay, it's happy, things are all right. Let's see if we can get our cameras to trigger. All right, so I'm gonna just move this guy around. You can see the camera is following him around pretty nicely. But it's not switching. All right, let's see what we got here. Collider, distance limits. Let's try and tweak our cameras to make something a little bit more obvious. So that's our first camera. That's our second camera. If I bring this camera over here. And maybe I'll move the first camera off to the side. So use a global coordinates so I can easily get that back. And then if I switch this back to local, you can see my gizmos change accordingly. So let's try moving this guy around now. All right, Navy SEAL prefab. It's using that one. Why are you not switching? Round robin, do nothing noise, collider, distance limits. I don't know, let's say give this 20, give this 20. See if that changes anything. Okay, there, that cut. So I'd have to like go read up on exactly what the rules are right here, right? But okay, my guy's walking around here, or I'm manually moving him, and the camera decided that that one was better based on some of those criteria, and now we move back over to the other one. So I think it probably does its best to try and avoid switching cameras if you can still see fine in the current camera. It's maybe when I put this guy behind the barrels, is that not looking for a clear shot? Yeah, I'd have to look into what rules it's using, but I think you get the idea. Okay, so next up, let's actually make a kind of third-person controller here. I'll make a copy of this free look. And here I have, you know, this is the third-person controller that's in standard assets. If you had standard assets there, you should see it pop up under here. So I drag that in there, and here I'll do this from scratch. I've got, you know, that camera right there that's not really set up to do anything just yet. If you want to have kind of a simple or a more customizable third-person camera using these tools, we can look in our Cinemachine list here for the camera type, and instead of just doing a regular virtual camera, we're going to do something a little bit more specialized, the free look. So, okay. Got these parameters, and again, I want to follow, or I want to look at the character, but now for a third-person controller, right, we actually want to move with them. We want to follow the character. So now you can see that here's our guides right here, and I don't want it right there, so let's clean that up. Y-axis. Actually, let me show you something first. Let's come in here and show you what's different here. So I think it might be a little faint and hard to see, but there are these 3 red rings right here. Let me see if I can. No, that doesn't help. All right. The way this is set up is it's kind of in a way blending between 3 virtual cameras, right? There's a camera that's defined for each one of these circles right here. So there's kind of a top ring, there's a middle ring, and then there's a bottom ring. So if we just try to look at it as is, let's see what we get here. Kind of watch what the camera's doing on that side. Okay, so you can see I moved the mouse left to right. You know, it's orbiting up, down. It kind of curves spherically around those 3. So it goes, here's the top one, here's the mid one, here's the low one. But, you know, they're not going in the right direction. So, or we don't really have a good view of our character. Let's clean that up. We have free look. Each of those rings is separated right here. You got top, middle, and bottom. So top, actually, there's also top, middle, and bottom right here. This is what I was looking for. So the rings, you can see that the bottom ring is pretty much down there. That's okay. But we probably maybe don't want to look so close in on our character. Maybe we want to pull back a little further. Not that far. So let's try, oops, 10 and 10. How does that get us? So that's, you know, probably a more appropriate distance, but now, you know, our top ring doesn't actually go very far, right? It kind of gets clamped up real quick. So what we'd probably like to do is crank this up. Let's see where that gets us. So now it's way up there, probably a little too much. And then this kind of fine tuning can go on for a while. Maybe I want it to curve in a little bit more when I get to the top. But, you know, now I can run around this. My controls seem like they're backwards. Okay, so one thing to watch out for when you're deleting cameras and doing stuff with cameras is a lot of logic depends on being able to find the camera with a certain tag, right? And so by default, when you make a new scene, that camera already has the tag called main camera on it. In this case, mine doesn't, which means that the third-person controller doesn't really know about how I'm looking at it. So when I push right on the keyboard, or the D key, instead of going to the right of the screen, right, it goes into like the positive X direction or something like that. So let's retag that back up there, and then I can run around here. All right, that's better. And there's controls in here that allow you to invert it and do some nice things. But when it comes to being able to kind of just tweak how your cameras look and feel without having to write any and kind of heavy math code, then you really get a lot out of the system. And actually, it's probably better than what most of us would, or almost all people would do if they were trying to write one just using code, right? This is one person working on designing camera systems for several years, and he was a camera engineer on AAA games before this. So that helps me trust it a little bit more. And from what I've seen, it's pretty powerful. So, okay, yeah, that's pretty dead simple to just make a third-person controller, and there's lots of things you can come in here and play with. Let's see. So let's try some other ones here. Aim, composer. No, I'll leave that alone. Let's look at the dolly example. come back here. Test the dolly track. All right. So let's see. In this case, let me get rid of that. Get rid of that. Start back up here. Main camera is tagged as main camera. That's good. Let's say I just want to make a camera follow a path, kind of like the Mario thing. Or maybe you're introducing your character to a level and you want to say, hey, before you start the level, here's a quick little fly through so you can see where things are at and orient yourself a little bit. So to do this thing, we'll want to lay down a track for a dolly to go, and then we'll have our camera on that dolly. So let's go to Cinemachine. This one is, let's create a dolly camera with the track. Okay. Now we have a virtual camera and we have a track here. So editing a track is pretty easy. I think what you can actually do is a little shortcut is if I want to kind of drive the camera to where I want things at, kind of like I was doing before. Let's say I'll start right here. I can get that in a position. And then I can go to the waypoints on the track and I can say, there you go, go to where I'm currently at. So there's the first point. Now let's move the second point to somewhere else. Let's say I want it to fly over here. Mark the second one. Let's maybe make a couple more fly around the level over here. Make that the third one. And, just kind of a very rough kind of track laying right there. Okay, so there's a few of those things. And if I want to close it into a loop, right, I can go ahead and do that as well. And now I have that track there. So here's my path, here's my waypoints, and I have a virtual camera that's not doing much on here. Let's undo this. This virtual camera is already set up to go on the track dolly, and the virtual camera actually has a position on it right here, right? It's actually located at this spot in the track. And this is set up by path units, which I don't remember what those are exactly, but we're not going to use it for this. So I could say that, I want to position that camera going around the track by using, the actual distance that you move along the track. Or I could say, let's do this in a normalized way. Go back to 0, and as I go toward 1, you can see it. 0 is the beginning, 1 is the start, and that gets me there. But I haven't really given any direction as to where to look right now. If I hit play, this is probably going to look pretty terrible. Or it won't look terrible, it just won't do anything at all. Right, because even though I mistakenly was thinking it was going to go around the track, there's nothing actually to tell it to go around the track, right? The thing that was making it move around the track right now was me dragging, where is it at? Actually dragging this parameter, right? This parameter is what tells it to go around the track. So we could use the animation system to do this. So let's see, do we want to do that? Let's, without using the timeline. Timeline's a little bit easier than this, but here's kind of what we saw before, right? Here's animation. I am going to create a new animation, test, and what I want to do is, let's say this is, I'll just record it right here, right? So it'll record whatever I do to be this current keyframe. So I'll say 0, boom. Now I got a keyframe for the path position to be 0 at time 0. All right, and then out here, I can just determine how long I want this to play. Let's say it's 10 seconds, right? And then I'll put the path position to 1. That's good. I've got an animation, but I don't think I've, I should be able to hit play and see this now at least. But I don't think I have anything to actually play my, actually, I've been in play mode the whole time. That's interesting. Well, okay, let's bring this back open. If I go to this camera, and I want to actually have an animator down here to play it. So, or this will play with an animator, yeah. The controller looks pretty simple. Basically, what's going to happen in this animation state is just going to start and go to player animation, which is not named very well. So now this animator should play along this track when I hit play. So let's try it now. All right. So not exactly quite achieving the desired effect. All right, there's going to be points of interest. And, a simple thing to do would be, well, I could create maybe an empty game object and have it just make sure it's looking at that, So this is point interest. And I don't know, that's fine, probably. So let's come back here, and in terms of our aiming, now we want to give it something to follow, which is going to be our point of interest, or not follow, sorry, look at. So, okay, you're going to look at our point of interest, and I want to see where you're currently at right now. Whoa. Why is it doing that? So this window guide should be showing me the red and teal color here. I'm not sure why that's not working. But I guess, okay, aim's not turned on, so that's a bad one. Even though I'm telling it to look at something, I'm not telling it how to do that, right? There's different ways here. Right? Normally we just use the composer, but we could say, hey, well, now I want you to look at multiple things that are part of a group, so it'll try to fit everything inside of that shot. We'll stick with this one for right now, and okay, now here's our window guides. So I kind of move where I want this to be on the screen, but the center is fine. Let's try playing that. So it's a pretty poor animation, but it was just kind of hacked together, and it looks like this is looping. But as with a lot of things with this sort, it really just requires kind of fine tuning and making good artistic choices. So, okay. This is for a more cinematic kind of approach. Let's say we wanted to, let's see here. Let's bring the third person controller back here. Put them right here. And I'm going to get rid of the point of interest. I'm also going to get rid of this animation, because instead of playing this animation, maybe I just want the camera to move along a fixed path, right? Before we had fixed locations, but now I want to say, well, instead of just cutting to the camera that it judges the best, I want it to move along the track in a way that makes the most sense for where my character is at. So let's come up here and first tell it to look at our third person right there. And now for the track dolly, I think auto dolly, that's what we want. So you want this to just be like, hey, try to make this work. In order to do that, we need to, it's telling us we need to follow target. So that's fine. I'll give you that to follow, but it's still constrained to that track. And now let's see what happens. All right, so here my character is moving around the level. Let me turn off the guides here. I don't need to look at that right now. Oh, I lost track of my character. Let me restart that. Okay. So he's like camouflaging in there. Character's moving off to the side. looks just like my level, but you know, it's moving along the dolly in a nice way, right? Yeah, pretty cool. So if I want to look at this, see what's going on at the same time over here. Here's our dolly moving along the track, and move the character, and it's just auto tracking him. Very cool. Let me show you one more thing. So let's see here. Let's introduce the nonlinear editor timeline. I don't know this tool super well, but you know, it does seem like it's pretty powerful and useful. Let's say I wanted to create a new sequence of stuff, you know, test timeline. So let's see what I could do. Let's try to make a scripted kind of sequence. Do I have navigation here? No. Let me bake some nav meshes here. Prison. I want to make these guys static. Yeah, great. And let's bake a nav mesh. That'll do. So now let's say we want to make like a little film of sorts, right? Instead of the player controlling a character, maybe you have a tutorial where you're showing the characters doing some predefined things. So what we might want to do is, where's our timeline? Didn't I make a timeline? Test timeline. Okay, so I'll put one of these guys in here, and you know, this looks a lot like the animation stuff, with the difference being that we're going to be able to lay down different tracks here. So let's say that I want to, as a third-person controller, let's bring in something else. Let's bring in that demo seal. So this guy have a nav mesh agent. So he has a nav mesh agent on it. So we should be able to tell it to go to a destination. So let's go to our timeline. I'm going to drag the Navy SEAL down here as a control track. I don't think that's what I want to do. Okay, so that's a different specialized thing. So you kind of have to be careful about dragging and dropping stuff on here, right? There's different track types. So if I just want to change something, right, I could actually make the animation directly in here, right? I could have an animation track. And actually, this is looking for an animator. Do I have a different way here? Maybe this won't work quite how I thought. Well, it's a Cinema Machine track. Let's see, what happens if I come in here? I'm just gonna futz around right here. Animation track, activation track. What is that? That just turns it on and off, probably. Let's try a different one. If we make animation track, what can I make under here? Add from animation clip. Well, all right. So this is, I'll probably have to learn this a little bit better to show you without making it overly confusing. But let me just do a more simple example. I think what I could do is, where is it? So I can make an animation track, and then here's our virtual camera. It's using auto dolly right now, right? But if I want to take control of that and make a track for it, what I can do is, I think I can make an animation track. And I'll put the thing I want to animate down here, which is the path position. Let's put that over there. Okay, and add override track. No. Oh, oh, okay, I remember. So like we did with the animation window, you can actually just kind of record what you want to do. So there is a record button right there. Let's go back to, all right, let's make sure our timeline stays there. Also, I'll lock it so I can select something else. And I'll go to the camera. Did I hit record? Oh no, I have to give it the animator. So here's the camera. Animator, record. Okay, now it lets us know it's recording. I want to have the path position be 0 at that point in the timeline, and then whatever, I'll put it to, I don't know, 1 over here. And not a great example, but what's great about this is instead of just animating one thing like we did before, right, I could have any number of different things all happening here, right? This timeline could have this animation that's making the camera move right here while it's having something else move starting here and going to there. And you can even crossfade or kind of layer these things. You can have all kinds of different things happening in your game at the same time, and it's all coordinated with this timeline. So I got a few minutes left here for questions, and if you guys want me to cover this better, I can probably get a better grip on it for tomorrow if you'd like. Or if we have any special requests for our last class, feel free to jump in and let me know.